I'm King Link and it's the middle of September, which means it's time for another look at Game Pass and what's come out over the last month. This is the video where I review each new game on Game Pass. I've played each title for a night, a few for a couple, and even bought a couple to support those developers. Now I can tell you what I like and what games you should check out. But there are a lot of games listed here. Normally we get a list every 2 weeks. This month Microsoft blessed us, or in my case cursed me. QuakeCon 2022 happened and even more legacy Bethesda games came out, and then as I was wrapping up my review, the Tokyo Game Show happened and sure enough another 4 games were added to the list on Friday. Way to ruin my weekend, Microsoft. There's another surprise release with the name of Death Stranding as well. That being said, every game listed will be covered except for Quake Champions, as that's just a perk for a sort of free-to-play game, and Despot's game, which has been delayed to the end of this month. I'm almost certainly going to be talking about that next time. After last month's week lineup, we've been given a ton of new games across a lot of genres. There's probably something for everyone here, so let's get into the list. Starting with Coffee Talk. I promise I will try not to make a Linda Richman reference. Coffee Talk in its purest form is a visual novel. People come in, spill their guts, and the player watches it. The stories are good with interesting characters. This is a fantasy world with vampires, werewolves, and orcs. There are a couple different storylines and they play out over a few weeks, but this is a game you can play through in a few hours. There's an alternate ending that's worth going for, but it won't take much longer. The downside though is some of the storylines are a little on the nose. A few are interesting, but 1 or 2 are just blatant about how they relate to the current climate in America. Also, the interactivity here is minimal. Players will be asked to make coffee by every guest, but it will only matter once or twice. I don't think it changes much more than a few lines, except for one piece. Pick this up if you want a solid story that can be a bit heavy-handed at times. I enjoyed my time and appreciate that it's the perfect length for a game. Any longer and it would have dragged out, but any shorter and you would have rushed through the character development. Though, as I think about one of the stories, oh god, I'm getting a little verklempt. Talk amongst yourselves in the comments. I'll give you a topic. Coffee Talk is neither a video nor a game. Discuss! Okay, I'm better. Thanks for giving me a moment. Oh, wait, what is this? So as mentioned during QuakeCon 2022, Microsoft put 5 titles on Game Pass for the PC. They're from over 17 years ago and they are the original games. Let's just quickly run through them. I'm not going to be giving too much on each. Wolfenstein 3D is the great granddaddy of the FPS genre. No mouse look, no regenerating health, just killing Nazis, and that's always a good thing. The Elder Scrolls Adventures Redguard has you on an adventure in the Elder Scrolls games, but honestly the controls here are horrible. However, if you love the lore and the world, this is perfect. An Elder Scrolls Legend Battlespear is more of a dungeon crawler in the Elder Scrolls universe, and I found it quite difficult but interesting. However, both of these games were made when they put Morrowind on hold for a time, and Morrowind is kind of the first great Elder Scrolls game. Make of that what you will. Return to Castle Wolfenstein is a better version of Wolfenstein 3D, and again, killing Nazis is cool, and this one is the better version of the two, but still quite dated. Finally, we have Quake 4, which is yet another FPS, this time focused on the Quake universe. I really enjoyed this one when it came out, but it's been 17 years. Honestly, out of all 5 games, this is probably the best and has a decent story, but it is still heavily dated. Ultimately though, all 5 of these games are dated gameplay and they are new on Game Pass, so I wanted to quickly cover them, but unless you're a huge retro fan, they have minimal value. They aren't remasters, so they don't have achievements. I'm just including them for completion's sake. I'm sure the next one will be a big title. Death Stranding, the true walking simulator. Death Stranding is Hideo Kojima at his Kojimist. This is a bizarre and strange story about reconnecting of the United States after a great tragedy. This actually came out at the end of 2019, and let's just say there's something about this game that is relevant to the next couple years, even a little today. However, while the story is the most batshit insane experience you'll probably see, the gameplay is unique, and I wasn't kidding calling it a walking simulator. The majority of what the player will do is explore the world, walk between locations, deliver packages, and cross the United States. There are bandits, unique creatures called BTs, and some action, but the walking and delivering are primary gameplay pieces, and they are quite enjoyable. Pick this up if you haven't played this game yet and have a PC. There is something unique, and if you like Kojima's Metal Gear Solid stories, this story will entertain you. But unfortunately, there's not an Xbox build of this game because Sony published the console versions, 505 Games published the PC versions. I am, however, looking forward to Kojima's next title, which should be on Game Pass day 1. Midnight Fight Express, an isometric beat-em-up similar to a certain Dark Knight. Midnight Fight Express's combat system starts recognizable. It's a modified version of the Batman Arkham City combat, beat up enemies, parry attacks, dodge unblockable moves, and in that it works. Players will be able to steal weapons away and beat enemies to a pulp, and there are a variety of different locations and enemy types. The downside is while the combat can be deep, it's mostly parry and dodge focused. Levels are short, which lets you see different locales, but never has too much depth to that location. While there is a lot of combat, after you get a decent way, it really feels like it's all the same with too much focus on reacting to enemies. Pick this up if you like beat 'em ups. Honestly, I almost wrote this game off, but I found out that it was created by a single developer, though I would say that doesn't change the game itself, and the game is compared to other $20 titles. The biggest problem is the game is very often similar, but still an incredible amount of effort along with a very deep combat system that deserves praise. Opus Echoes of Starsong, a spacefaring journey into the unknown. Opus Echoes of Starsong can be hard to place a finger on. It looks like a side-scrolling action game, but the core of the game is the story and resource management. The core story here is solid, telling of a disgraced leader who needs to regain his group's fortune, a woman who has a prized skill, and a universe that has overgone multiple turmoils. It's a compelling narrative. On the other hand, the gameplay is a bit lacking at times. There are some randomized events as well as dice rolls, but this isn't a game intended to challenge the player, but rather a story with enough interactivity that players won't call it a walking simulator. Resource management is an interesting addition, but at least in the early game, it was very simple to balance all the desires. Pick this up if you want to go on an interstellar adventure. In this, Opus succeeds, but if you're looking for anything challenging, this isn't really the game. It's a visual novel that succeeds in not appearing to be a visual novel, and that's a strong positive. Tinykin. Finally, someone brings a Nintendo formula to the PC. Tinykin is Pikmin. I've seen people call it everything from Chibi Robo to Mario, but this is absolutely a Pikmin clone. I'm always amazed at how few PC games are based on the Nintendo franchises, but Tinykin does this right and it's fantastic. You explore a large house and meet various creatures that can accomplish different goals. At the same time, Tinykin is a bit short with only 6 levels. There are collectibles and small challenges after the game, but it may only last about 10 hours. There's not a lot of challenge either, but it is still very fun. The gameplay is really solid and the style is brilliant. Every level is a different piece of the house, and the experience here is fantastic. Pick this up if you like Pikmin, or if you want an interesting game where you explore a house. This should get a lot of attention. It's the perfect game to play with your kids or just by yourself. I enjoyed this game so much that I actually bought a copy on Steam because I want more games like this. A small note, there does appear to be a problem with AMD graphics cards in this game. Not everyone is having it, but a close friend of mine's game is unplayable at this point, which is an absolute shame because he also enjoyed the first level. Hopefully they can fix that. Commandoes 3, a real-time tactics game set in World War II. Commandoes 3 is a game from 2003. It's a different type of game where you move multiple characters around and take out enemies. Gameplay has you choosing a character, setting up actions, and usually hoping the enemy doesn't see you, as your characters are ultra squishy. There are a lot of different missions, such as a sniping mission or stealth, but ultimately the goal is to kill Nazis. This is a remaster, but the gameplay here just doesn't feel that exciting, and most of the game seems focused on saving, trying something, and then loading when it fails. Thank God for quick save. There's a good, interesting combat, but even in the real-time tactics genre, there are better games like Desperados 3, which is a better constructed and paced game. Pick this up if you're a fan of the original Commandos 3 and want a better looking version, though not all fans of this game are happy. There are noticeable changes to the formula, and this has a lot of stuff that can be nitpicked. If you're a fan of real-time tactics games though, there are better choices out there. Immortals Fenyx Rising, Breath of the Wild but with Greek gods and Ubisoft. Immortals Fenyx Rising takes the Breath of the Wild formula and applies it to the Greek pantheon, where you follow Fenyx, a totally normal human, just totally normal, who gets the powers of the god, explores the world, climbs up huge cliffs, and fights against an evil monster named Typhon. There are a lot of collectibles to find in a massive world. But this is still an Ubisoft game. The story is strong for the first 4 hours, but that's really the prologue. After that, it's mostly exploring the world on your own with only light stories involved. The world is massive, but for the most part, you're collecting the same loot hundreds of times. And of course, there's a shop with a lot of requests for some more of your money for cosmetics in a single-player game. That always pisses me off. Some daily quests and weeklies don't feel necessary. Pick this up if you like Breath of the Wild or are curious about it. Similar to Tinykin, this is someone taking Nintendo's formula and doing it on other platforms. I'll even say something controversial. I don't really like Breath of the Wild that much, and I think this is better in many ways.
What that means is you have to adapt to the ingredients on hand. I went to scout one driver, but found another. And
Grid Legends, a story-based but casual racing game. So we get a sports title, this time it's racing, and Grid Legends does something that not many racing titles do. It puts a full story into this game about the player joining a weak racing team and making them into a major force. The story actually has live actors and is well done. There's even a villain for some reason, but mostly it's about building up your team. The downside is there's really no challenge in this game. The story talks about you just beating other teams or just getting a certain place, and the objectives is to beat a specific car. However, I took first place in every single race on the first attempt but won. The driving model here isn't that realistic, and the challenge is almost non-existent, to the point that players will likely do well even on the hardest difficulty. Pick this up if you want an easy racing game. This is perfect for children or inexperienced gamers, but anyone who is somewhat accomplished will find no challenge here. I'm actually looking forward to Forza, and Horizon 5 was great, though compared to some of the ultra-hard racing games like MotoGP 22, I prefer this, but neither is really my favorite.
7 Bravo, take 2.
Immortality, finding found footage. Immortality is a strange game, and I wouldn't expect anything less from Sam Barlow, who previously made Her Story and Telling Lies. Immortality is based on 3 movies that were never released, and players are tasked with finding clips. This time players will search out clips based on similar objects instead of words. The scenes are well acted and intriguing, and each of the 3 movies at the center of the game are interesting enough even without the overarching narrative. But this isn't perfect. There are 3 phases. Players will have to find all the clips, then they can watch them all, and finally there's a secret part, but really it's more watching. The problem is these moments don't really mesh as well as they should. I spent most of my first 2 hours just trying to unlock all the clips, and then sitting and watching them is a very long process. There's 10 hours of footage, though again, the acting, directing, and filmography are exceptional. Pick this up if you enjoy stories. In a lot of ways, this is more of a movie than a game, and that's also true of Her Story and Telling Lies. I still think Her Story is Sam Barlow's best work, but this is compelling and I would put it over Telling Lies. I've actually seen about a third of the entire game and I stopped, but I might go back and pick it up again. The viewing though is exceptionally passive, and it's hard to do at the same time as unlocking new scenes. Still, it's a very unique title. Also, I will give one caution, this is extremely adult, so definitely not for kids.
You remember the red ship? I know people say this thing was underpowered, but it has its charms. This is the developer version.
Exapunks, one of Zachtronic's best. With Zachtronics closing and just releasing their final titles, the Solitaire Collection, Game Pass is getting my favorite game from Zachtronics. This is a coding game where players will program little drones to do jobs inside of cyberspace, as well as the human body. It's a strange idea, and as always, it's a chance to use assembly language to solve problems and optimize your code. Which is also a negative. This is a pure programming game where you use a manual to learn the language as well as about the world, and then you write actual programs that execute. I've said before with TIS 100 and Shenzhen IO that if someone completed the game authentically, I'd consider them a solid programmer, and it's one of the reasons I love the series because I actually do this professionally. So the positive is that it's an amazing programming game, and the negative is it's a programming game. Pick this up if, well, I just keep saying it, if you like programming games. This is just an exceptionally well done game, and optimizing programs or just solving puzzles is so good. The interface is amazing and the concept is interesting. There's a story, like always, but as it's been said, it will be about writing code. Disney Dreamlight Valley, Animal Crossing with Disney characters. But wait. Disney Dreamlight Valley combines Animal Crossing or Stardew Valley gameplay with Disney characters. You meet famous mascots, do tasks, and have to help out around town. Meeting Ursula or Remy is really exciting, and while there is a limited voice content, there's something magical about exploring this world. However, this is made by Gameloft, which is a mobile game maker. This is also just early access, and when it launches it will be free to play. I think a lot of reviews are praising this game because the free to play systems aren't turned on, but I don't know many free to play games, especially ones that look this good, that survive unfair monetization. Also, this has the annoyance that if you play it at night, you only see the game at night, and miss out on some characters who go to bed early. Pick this up if you love Disney or you have kids, but I have concern that this game will become exceedingly greedy when it leaves early access. Buying the game now is only for that early access as well as some of the premium currency. I just don't trust the publisher, having known them for a long time and knowing people who work there. One of which I think is actually a subscriber on my channel. Hey Eric.
Right on target.
DC League of Super Pets, The Adventure of Krypto and Ace. This reminds me of Afterburner. League of Super Pets has the player taking over the role of Krypto, Superman's dog, or Ace, Batman's dog. They fly through levels in a corridor shooter, taking down Lex spots and tackling enemies. This is a tie-in with the movie of the same name. It's a simple shooter with the idea of simply flying through the levels and taking down enemies. There's a scoring system, a couple of sub-games, and leveling up different skills. The downside though is it's made for kids. There's no difficulty here, the levels all look the same with each area getting a small facelift, and the enemies aren't that interesting. The game though feels oddly cheap in a weird way. There's not even a main menu, you just get thrown into the map, and most of the game already feels like it's playing itself. Nothing that awful, but it does feel like a developer dashed this off in a weekend. Maybe this was an extremely rushed development, but if so, it shows. Pick this up if you have a kid and like League of Super Pets or you want achievements. You can get all the achievements here in about 3 hours if you can stomach the game, but overall this is made for kids, and that's understandable. However, there are better games for children. I didn't actually hate this though. You Suck at Parking. Wait, how do they know that? You Suck at Parking is an arcadey little game where you have to drive a car, park it in specific locations, and do the same for each parking spot on a level. It's a simple concept that rapidly gets more complicated, especially if you're aiming to earn gold, where you don't want to make a mistake on each level. Single player is good, but multiplayer is definitely where you're going to want to spend time. However, you can't partner with friends yet, but that is coming in a couple months. The biggest problem is for a budget title like this, why are there so many microtransactions already? There are a ton of customizations to buy, a battle pass, and even a season pass. It's too much for any $20 game, and it's a shame because the base game is really good, but the microtransactions leave a bad taste in my mouth. Pick this up if you like the idea of this game. The single player game is pretty solid, but this is the problem. It has a good single player or multiplayer, but the rush to microtransactions here really taints the idea, and the battle pass popping up after almost every match to show you what you would win if you bought the battle pass is gross. Just say no to battle passes. Train Sim World 3, Riding the Rails. Train Sim World 3 is exactly what it sounds like. There are a lot of trains and you simulate driving them. The simulation does feel very good and the experience of driving these massive machines is fun. There are a lot of tutorials for almost everything, something like 800 routes that you can take on, and different trains have different controls, features, and more. On the other hand, this is only driving routes. There are a few collectibles, but nothing that interesting to find, and the free roam lacks purpose. You're mostly just going to be sitting in the front of the train, controlling the speed. There's also DLC, which is expensive. You can get the starter pack for $40, but if you want a specific route, be prepared to drop maybe up to another $40 on a new route, which is insane, as well as other trains as well. Pick this up if you're fascinated with trains. I'm not, but I got interested here, and the level of tutorials is just right for teaching players about trains. That being said, I probably won't be returning, but I fully understand why people love this. I'm not going to fault a game called Train Sim World about being a train simulator. Opus Magnum, Zachtronic's perfect starter. Zachtronics is amazing, blah blah blah. Rewatch the Exapunks review to go over why Zachtronics is great. Opus Magnum is the most accessible Zachtronics game, the one I recommend new players start with. You play an alchemist who needs to transmute and transform elements as requested. You do this by placing Waldo, grabbing hands, and objects, and then programming those grabbing hands to do repetitive actions. This is a refinement of the formula for all Zachtronics games. It reminds me a lot of one of their first games, Space Chem. While this isn't a programming game in the same way as the others, it does remind me of using Scratch and is heavily logic-based and focused on optimizing your solutions after coming up with them. It's a challenging game, but it's also wickedly interesting as well. Pick this up if you like Zachtronics games. There are enough of them on the service that you should check out. However, if you haven't tried any of them yet, this is absolutely the game to start with. It's welcoming, interesting, and easy to pick up. Then go play the rest. They're all amazing. Ashes of the Singularity Escalation. Wow, people are still making RTS titles? Ashes of the Singularity is from 2016, but this is still an impressive game. It's an RTS that can have massive battles, huge unit counts, and more. The unit count is amazing, and the combat here is pretty active to the point that it's often hard to change directions in the middle of it. There's a series of good-sized campaigns, and the gameplay is pretty solid from what I've seen, though I didn't venture online. The downside though is the campaign difficulty is still off. Even after they balanced it a few times, the mission you're seeing on screen was decently hard to time right, and the fans agree the campaign gets easier after this one. I actually noticed it as well. The single player should get you ready for the multiplayer, but the player base online is dead, with under 100 players on Steam charts. Pick this up if you like the RTS genre. This game has a huge unit count, massive battles, interesting units, and 2 diverse factions, but this is probably going to be only for single players unless you have someone specific you want to play against. Amazing Cultivation Simulator, a Chinese management game. Amazing Cultivation Simulator is cut from the same cloth as RimWorld. The focus on the game is different based on Chinese mythology with a focus on Feng Shui, and I can try to pass myself off as being knowledgeable here, but I'm really not. Still, this works. You help train acolytes who can eventually learn the inner secrets of your law, and the whole game is based around the building up of your society while caring for your acolytes. The downside though is this is a very deep game with entirely too much to learn, and while the tutorials try, you're gonna have to read online for a lot of information. The in-game help page is almost worthless. Also, you can't directly control units, you're only able to issue orders, and it's usually a little confusing to figure out why something isn't happening, especially if there's a resource missing. Pick this up if you like Chinese mythology or deep management games. There's actually a ton here, and honestly, Amazing Cultivation Simulator is rather good, though I will say the depth is probably going to keep me from attempting to learn this title. This feels something like you devote your entire life to learning, kind of like those hidden arts at the core of the game. Fuga, Melodies of Steel, a tank tactics game. Fuga, Melody of Steel has players joining a group of children in a tank and fighting against an invading army, hoping to save their parents. The game focuses on advancing on a mostly linear path and trying to fight against each enemy group, which they battle using a trinity of weapons, each with a different color and each with a different purpose. It's a solid tactical game with interesting characters. The downside is this game can be very long-winded with its story. The combat is tactical so far, but I haven't seen anything too challenging outside of the boss combat, and even there it's mostly blocking at the right time. There's a moment I would talk about in the prologue, but I don't really want to ruin it. Oh, and everyone's a furry, though I think it works here. Pick this up if you like tactics games. The anime-style story at the core here is good, but you can be spending most of your time in the tank or trying to improve your gear or team so you can keep moving forward. This was a pretty enjoyable game though. Before I get to the last game, I'm going to be covering a couple more. During the TGS 2022 game show, Microsoft just announced a ton of games coming to the service that are out today, including Fuga. I've played the rest of these previously, so I'm just going to give you a quick look at each of them due to limited time. Ni no Kuni Wrath of the Witch King Remastered, an anime RPG with a Pokemon flair. Ni no Kuni is a solid game with anime style. It has a very typical Japanese RPG battle system with turn-based combat, but you're going to recruit familiars to assist you. Though I will say this game does go on a bit too long. I think the third act here felt completely unnecessary and took the game I enjoyed a lot, made it a lot more tedious. Danganronpa V3, another Danganronpa, and just like the first two, it has the same problem. There are two major issues I have with this title. First off, the girl who was promoted as the main character and I'm playing as here isn't the main character. Let's just leave that there. The bigger and more spoilerific problem is the ending. This is an extremely divisive ending, but in my opinion it almost ruins the entire series. But if you have played the first two, play through this one and find out yourself why. However, it has the best additional modes of the entire series as well. Assassin's Creed Odyssey. This is the Ubisoft game that made me stop playing Ubisoft games. After Origins, I figured Odyssey would be very similar, and it is, but it's also far weaker for a few reasons. So much of this game just feels like filler content, and the map is massive but boring. And in fact, that's what a lot of Ubisoft does. But this is the one that made me realize having a very long, average level game wasn't enough to make me waste my time on. I gave this a 2 out of 5, and I actually stick with that. Sorry to shotgun a couple of games in here, but I wanted to cover everything over the past month, and that was included. So let's just look at one more game.
Well, Conquering Vogue gave me knowledge of myself. My ultimate, I guess you could say.
Metal Hellsinger, Rocking Hell to Death. Metal Hellsinger has the player as a fallen archangel known as Unknown, and on the path to make the not-quite-devil pay. You do this by playing an FPS and shooting on the beat, as well as dodging the colorful denizens of Hell. There are quite a lot of great designs on display here, and a ton of challenges and awesome music, which adds in more tracks including vocals the better you do, similar to SSX3. The downside is I found myself enjoying the easier difficulty mode, not actually for the gameplay, but because the music really only works when you're able to properly stick with the beat. So challenge yourself or enjoy yourself. You really can't do both. Many of the arenas in this game go on too long, and the bosses appear to always be the same design, which is a bit of a shame. Pick this up if you enjoy rhythm games or BPM, you know, the other rhythm FPS. This is a little more welcoming to the rhythmically challenged. Also, this isn't a roguelite at all, it's all designed as straight levels with static encounters, but like I said, those do linger on for too long. And that's the last game. I've actually counted 27 titles covered this month, which honestly is probably entirely too many and makes this video too long. I'm going to actually be considering what I can do, but I wanted to give everyone a chance to see everything on the service. We'll see. I'm going to avoid going deeper on this bundle for brevity's sake, but I will say I think there's something for everyone this month. Every major genre was covered. There were shooters, RPGs, tactical games, rhythm games, and more, and I'm amazed at the breadth of games on display here. But as always, there are only 5 that can earn my coveted prize of being named the best of the month. And this month there were so many to choose from that it was hard to pick, but here's the list. The 5th strongest of this month is Immortality. This is the most unique game on this list and probably on the service. I'm actually torn on the fact that so much of it is just watching footage, but the footage here is so good that I don't mind it that much. The story is compelling, but there are a lot of questions left open, so I'm going to have to keep watching. I wish I could put this higher. The 4th strongest of this month is Exapunks and Opus Magnum. They're both Zachtronics, and while I'll show Exapunks here because that's my favorite, Opus Magnum is equally solid and friendlier to new players. If you've never played a Zachtronics game, this is yet another perfect time to try one out. The 3rd strongest of this month is Immortals Fenyx Rising. I dislike Ubisoft, but I still can't deny when they do something right. Immortals Fenyx Rising is solid and I love the design. It still has that large open world feel, but it's also the Greek mythology involved here. Keeps making me want to see what they've done with everyone. Yet those dang microtransactions almost kept it off this list or even the bottom. The 2nd strongest of this month is Death Stranding. An IP Sony owns is on Game Pass. What the hell? Technically, 505 Games is the publisher on PC, but it's still close enough to blow my mind. I do feel bad console owners can't play this, but I'm thrilled that even more people get to experience Kojima's complete insanity, or how a walking simulator actually could be compelling. And the strongest title of this month, it's Tinykin. I bought this one on Steam because I wanted to support the developers directly, and that was after playing the entire game on Game Pass and loving every minute. This is incredible, and I love the design and the world here. It's a fresh breath of air, and I hope many more people discover the magic of this game. And that's what I have for you this month. Like I said, 27 games, this has taken me forever, and I hope you enjoy it. I do want to call out something new that I'm doing. It's an experiment. I'm trying to break up these videos into shorts and post them, but I hate when people post short content on their main channel, so I've created a second channel. If you prefer the short version of the same content, I'll put a link of my new channel in the description. If instead you prefer these longer, or in this case extremely long videos, well, you don't have to make a change. Of course, if you aren't subscribed yet, you know I have to recommend subscribing and ringing that bell so you can see these videos. I will say that this video has actually tested my resolve, so if you have any thoughts on how I can handle 27 or even more games in the future, let me know down in the comments, or which of these games were your favorite. Now, as I said, this video is already very long, but the good news is that we have some incredible games coming up, Deathloop and Slime Rancher 2 for sure, so I'll be glad to cover those next month. I'll be popping up some old reviews here, so if you want a more in-depth look at Danganronpa V3, Assassin's Creed Odyssey, or since we've had 2 games from Zachtronics, we'll show that Zachtronics tribute just one last time. See you next time.